The European Union's defence minister meeting is currently happening in Brussels, and they are discussing boosting the bloc's support for Ukraine and the disputed Venezuelan elections. The defence officials are also expected to look into Europe's defence more generally in the face of what they perceive to be a growing Russian threat. And DD India correspondent Alex Carrier joins us live from Brussels to talk more on this. Good evening from India, Alex. When we talk about this defence ministers meeting, what are the top discussions on agenda at this informal meetings of European Union defence ministers in Brussels, Alex?
Well, the main topic will be Ukraine, of course. That has been a principal topic for these defence ministers for years now, since the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The focus will be specifically for these defence ministers on whether or not to lift some of the restrictions that they have placed on Ukraine when using the weapons given to the Ukrainian forces, restrictions as to how deep into Russian territory they can strike. That will be a big question for those ministers. It won't be an EU-level decision. It's up to the individual countries, most notably France and Germany, who have given long-range weaponry to Ukraine, whether or not they allow Ukraine to hit Russian military targets deep in Russian territory. And we know that the Ukrainians have built their own drone program, which allows them to hit some targets in Russian territory. But this will be a big question, particularly as we've seen, you mentioned it yourself, the bombing in Sumy, which targeted civilian infrastructure, according to the Ukrainian officials. We've seen the targeting of energy infrastructure, in particular in Ukraine, has really been hit very hard by the Russians, as have some residential areas. And so the Ukrainians say we need to be able to strike Russia's long-range bombers or Russia's equipment, which is much further into the territory. That's a big question for those European ministers. Also a question of how to use frozen Russian assets in the European Union to help fund the reconstruction of Ukraine. One difference there is that the EU is saying they will go ahead with this plan irrespective of who is in the White House in November. They will continue to support Ukraine as long as it takes. So that gives you a flavor. Also, the ministers will be looking at some of the issues in the Middle East. Particularly, we know that the top diplomat, Josep Borrell, suggested sanctions against 2 Israeli ministers. So all of that is on the table at this ministerial meeting here in Brussels.
And also, Defence Minister of Ukraine is participating in this meeting. He took part yesterday also. What is the stand of Russia on all of these developments that we are witnessing? What sort of reaction are we really expecting from Russia on this?
Well, the reaction from Russia will be to continue its invasion of Ukraine. The fear, in fact, particularly when it comes to striking deep into Russian territory, the fear by some European capitals is a reaction, if not what they see as an overreaction by Russia in Ukraine. There have been threats of using nuclear weapons. We've seen Vladimir Putin and some of his military commanders and some of his allies suggesting the use of nuclear weapons in response to Ukraine's attacks in Russian territory, particularly what we've seen in the Kursk region in the last few weeks. So the real question from Moscow, there's not been an official response to this particular meeting, but there will be a response on the battlefield. We understand that Moscow has been infuriated by the incursion into Kursk by the Ukrainian forces and will likely strike back in a very tough way. That is what we can expect as a response from Moscow. More targeting civilian infrastructure, according to the Ukrainians, and really a ramping up of this war.
All right. Thank you so much, Alex Carrier, for joining us and bringing us a rounded perspective on the ongoing meeting.